Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Christmas live stream, I should say. So before we start, if you want to come on, you can message me on Discord. The link is in the description, or you can email me. That's also in the description. And if you have any questions, you can send that on Discord on my questions and answers page or channel on my main page, or you could email me, social media, or just in live chat. And I leave the discussion open, so if anyone wants to, discuss anything, then I'm open for that. But if we get a question, then that's sort of the main priority. So, anyone want to start something out? Oh, how was your guys' Christmas? That's probably appropriate.
My Christmas was pretty good. I had like a large dinner tonight. Opened up some of my presents I got from my friends. Talked to some family members, stuff like that. You guys?
Yeah, pretty much the same here too. Was watching movies and stuff.
Yeah, mine was pretty simple, but definitely pretty good. So same deal going on here.
Well, as some viewers may be able to tell, I got a new camera based on better quality, and saw two movies today. One, Infinity War, came out on Netflix, which was awesome, so I watched that again, even though I've probably seen it 1,000 times on YouTube.
Well, yeah.
And
Now I
scenes, of
can.
course.
Yeah, I could tell that you're in better quality because now I can see how more petty you are.
Funny. But well, what is logic? If you can tell me that, then my definition, then I won't call you petty. But until then, you're petty as well. Yeah, because that's the appropriate response if you don't know how to answer that question. And I also saw Aquaman, which I thought was going to be sort of dumb, but it actually ended up being pretty good because they did not make Aquaman like the comics. Because I have certain words that may not be appropriate for this stream, but for the original Aquaman, if people catch my drift. But other than that, it was pretty good.
Probably the best Aquaman that I've seen outside of this new movie one, which is actually pretty good. I would find that the Batman Brave and the Bold Aquaman is pretty good as well.
Is that a cartoon or like an
Yeah.
actual? Okay, I would have to check that out.
I like the voice actor and how they really put it out there because they kind of made him like a sort of like a pirate in a
Hmm.
way. Uh,
So yeah,
they gave him like a very pirate voice.
oh yeah, I like the new Aquaman because he's sort of the guy who doesn't care. He's sort of like an aquatic Tarzan, you could say. Don't know if that's a proper description, but that's what it seems like to me. So people watching now, because when I first made announcements, not too many people are watching, but there's a few watching now. If you have questions, then oh hey, everything's biblical or everything biblical. If you have questions, then you can ask them. But in the meantime, we're going to be discussing. And if you want the link, then just email me, Discord, or social media, basically. So something I've been thinking about recently. Well, I was talking about my Augustine article on time that I just put out. I have to share on all my Facebook pages that I follow here soon. And I just did. Well, I had this video done for a while, but what was God doing before creation? I also go into that in the Augustine article, so people can check that out. So my second to most recent upload, I believe, before the last Christian Truth or Apologetics podcast. Basically, Augustine's main answer is, for those who ask these questions, God was preparing hell before creation. Just kidding, but that's a joke. Some people may be offended.
That was funny.
I was saying I had mentioned like something that he was like watching football.
Or one guy asked me, well, the joke on Family Guy is he was arm wrestling with his roommate Kevin.
Yeah. And he farted and that was the Big Bang.
Yeah. There was like nothing and then boom, everything. Yeah, that should be the best hypothesis, or probably philosophical, metaphysical conclusion based on, God just started it into existence. Makes sense. Family Guy proves it.
It's very theologically ground.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane definitely isn't biased in any way at all, and definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to theology.
Oh,
But
yeah.
oh yeah,
Like Ricky Gervais.
yeah, Ricky Gervais,
Jerkface.
yeah, his 3,000 gods argument that that Michael Shermer passed that on, but that was I haven't heard that in a little while, but I debunked it in one article called "Loaded Question Fallacy."
Shermer's such a dillweed, though.
Yeah, his field I think is like psychology, so obviously in these debates he's not the best, but
No. He sucks at philosophy, too.
oh yeah, definitely. And he's not the best debater.
No.
Well, I can admit Sam Harris is a good debater. I thought there are a few points Craig could have.
Well, who is a good atheist debater, do you think?
Christopher Hitchens, even though he did not stay on point.
Well, okay, I can see what you're saying.
He got more, he got more charisma, and he would like in his debate with Frank Turek. I thought that was probably the hardest debate Turek probably had to go through, but he'll just ignore points by Turek and then just go on something completely irrelevant. Like they were asking the origin of DNA, and he went into some sailor analogy, or no, that was why was there something rather than nothing. I was just like, what does this have to do with this question?
Yeah.
Sean Carroll.
Well, I mean, you have to remember, man, that he was probably hammered when he came there.
His brother, like, kind of exposed him a little bit, though. I like Peter Hitchens.
Oh my goodness, that debate was like the best debate ever. Because I have a brother, and if we were to somehow, I would destroy him obviously because he does electrical work for a living, so I don't think he would be up to date as I am with his stuff. But
Is he a
Merry
philosopher
Christmas,
too?
No. So I'm on my article, and I have Google AdSense ads on there, and for some reason, on my Christian Apologetics website, I have meet other agnostics and atheists, and there's nothing I can really do about that, which is sort of stupid. But then I have other good ads, which I can't really get rid of either. So, but they're random. Oh yeah, back to what was God doing before creation. Yeah, I basically just argue God's in the Trinity in the timeless state.
God stuff.
Yeah. God was doing stuff, only his knowledge known to himself. Yeah, no, I basically argue that God was timeless in the Trinity, and then when he creates, he becomes temporal in the sense that he's not constrained by time, but time is something that he has to indwell in based on omnipresence. That would seem to make sense. And he sort of controls the dial, you could say, of what time is, and I suspect it could be B theory of time or A theory. Of course, I'm an A theorist. With
B theorist.
B theorist. I'm an idealist all the way, baby.
Yeah, substance dualist. More biblical, but you know. So,
well, I mean, aren't you also like a modalist still? You are.
No comment.
Pretty sure are you Trinitarian, or are you going back and forth again?
No comment right now.
Are you like floating between Unitarianism and Trinity?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh no, modalism is still Unitarian, but you can say that Unitarian in essence, yeah.
Well, modalism would be kind of different from what I've read. I might be wrong, but it seems like Unitarian doesn't say Jesus like is God,
right,
from what I've heard.
Yeah, well,
but I would say oneness is like they all are.
Yeah, Muslims would say Muslims would not be modalist because they don't believe in the Holy Spirit or Christ, obviously. So they would be Unitarian. God will be Unitarian in nature, and then I still don't understand on modalism how you get the eternal relationship between the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
That's assuming God needs a relationship, though. God is perfect. He's self-sufficient. He doesn't need to have a relationship.
I'm not saying he has to, but I'm going with what the text is. This is a biblical. I don't think philosophy is. Philosophy, I think, just gets us to theism and so on, and then revelation of the Trinity is obviously special revelation, and I think that comes down to debate on the biblical text and so on. Was Santa oh, okay, that's not a question for me.
Christmas is pagan. Let's talk about that.
I don't know enough, but if you guys
Horse walking on water, and then so
I was thinking about mirroring the horse video. You know, the one guy's in church.
Yeah, that's an awesome video.
And then
it's made by Catholics, by the way.
Yeah, but it's still funny. I was thinking about just uploading it and then just playing it. Every mythicist argument summarized in 5 minutes and debunked.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job. I think Rob likes him too. I think he said that was a really good video.
Well, yeah, that's where I watched it before the stream, and she was like, "Oh, this is," because I saw it longer ago, and then I came across DA's page, and for some reason he shows his search history. Hopefully, he doesn't make a mistake on what he searches up, because then it's open to the public. But I saw that was like the most recent video he watched.
Yeah, and there's already atheists. They're still perpetrating that argument. I've seen like 3 atheists today talking about that. I mean, come on, really, dude?
Yeah, well, those arguments are irrelevant, I would say, because they've been debunked and they don't want to listen to the scholarship. Okay, so 2 questions. Am I Trinitarian? Yes. And then are Catholics Christians? Okay, so there will probably be disagreements. I think you can be saved with false theology. I think you can be saved with that, but praise will probably disagree.
Yeah, it depends on your biblical knowledge. If you're ignorant, I certainly think you can be. I mean, that could be your friend during judgment, but
if you truly believe in the councils of Trent, who say that if you believe in faith alone, you're heretics, and so on, then obviously we have refuted, I guess, because debunk would be there's no possible. Debunk would be more of you show a logical contradiction, like there can't be a married bachelor. Then refuted would be like, most likely this isn't the case. So most likely the case, any mythicist argument is not true. And back to the Councils of Trent. I forget which section it is, but it basically says that. But I don't, from my experience from talking with the general Catholics, they don't believe things in like that. They obviously believe works is a part of salvation. I've got a few to admit it's part of sanctification, and at that point, I don't think there's a problem. But what are your views, Anchored?
I would say that I've seen certain things that certain Catholics would put out. Like for some reason, I've just studied a lot of Peter Diamond. I have no idea why, but maybe it's because a lot of his conditional security stuff is interesting. I don't know if I'd hold like everything he does to that extent, but I would say that I have met a lot of what I would call like devout Catholics, and I think that when you really get into it and really get into like needing all the sacraments, I think that baptismal regeneration is the one that kind of irks me the most, and a lot of them will really hold to that. I think that the more you get into it, there are a lot of ways that it can basically split away from true Christianity, but I guess it would depend on how much they really know.
Well, I'm with C.S. Lewis, and if Reformed Christian Apologist is watching, we sort of discussed this earlier. I disagree with his critique. You could say mere Christianity. He argues for pure Christianity. If you want to check that out, the documentary is on his page. I like C.S. Lewis's analogy of the hallway. You know, all Christians are in the same hallway. We have different rooms which represent denominations, and then obviously each room is different, and that would represent how each denomination has different theologies. But they're all saved. They're all in the same hallway. So the only part where that gets breaking down is when you define, well, what is the Catholic Church really? And then again to Orthodoxy. Like usually in America, you just hear about Catholicism versus Protestantism. Then you don't even hear about Eastern Orthodoxy, and I didn't hear about that until like a few years ago when I first started my channel.
Some of my family came out of Eastern Orthodoxy, so yeah, I know quite a bit about it. I've got quite a bit of bias against it when you really get into it.
Yeah, I think I was doing a lot. I think I want to do a live stream with Jay Dyer. He said he wanted to debate me on it. I told him I do consider myself towards more Protestant theology, but I'm not like an expert in Protestant theology, so I would not be able to debate him. I said he would probably destroy me in that. But I'm interested in learning about Eastern Orthodoxy because obviously I admitted earlier that I don't know enough about it to critique it. So
I guess like the main thing I'd say is you can argue that they're polytheist, but that's kind of an interesting subject where if you dive into that, I think a really good case can be made for it. I just like, if you watch their, I know it's more of like an emotional argument, but if you watch what they're doing in their services and whatnot, man, it just kind of looks like a circus to me, to be honest. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's religiosity which turns atheists away, but also turns, to me, Christians away too, though.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like Romans 14 that says, if one, I would have to pull it up, but be convinced in your own minds. If you cause one to stumble out of that, then you've committed sin.
But Matt Slick actually made a great point, though. You can debunk Calvinism with one question. I mean, not Calvinism, I mean Catholicism. He says,
I agree, though, about the Calvinism, too.
Even that too, yeah. But he said, all you got to do is ask him, can you pray to Jesus to forgive your sins? He put him in a predicament there. If they have to go through some other angel or whatever, saint or whatever, that contradicts their theology, so they have to say Jesus because they wouldn't be Christian in the first place. So that's how you can debunk him in one question.
Yeah, I was listening to that stream. Are you talking about the one he did the other night this week?
No, this was like 3 months ago.
Oh, okay.
He's a pretty good apologetic when it comes to like Catholicism and stuff. It's weird.
Yeah, I discussed Calvinism with him. He's a better Calvinist. I'll give him that than some of the. And don't get me wrong, I definitely think Calvinists are Christians, even if they hold hyper-Calvinism.
Yeah, I would agree with that, too. I just have, like, 10,000 issues with Calvinism that I think are, like, all very valid.
There's one worship song called 10,000 Reasons. We could turn that into 10,000 Reasons Why Calvinism is False.
I think we should, man.
Do you know the song I'm talking about? I think it's.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I know it.
Working on the remake literally right now, so I'll let you guys know when that's done.
Yeah, speaking about worship music, I used to listen to it, like, often. I don't as much, but it's not a bad thing to do. But, you know,
I still do.
There's this one song where they include young Earth creationism in it, and
Behemoth is a dinosaur is he.
No, not that. It has something to do with 6,000 years old.
You know, that damn song is still stuck in my head.
Oh, is that an actual song with
Yeah, Buddy Jones from Answers in Genesis.
God,
It's like
those young Earth creationists, man. I don't know.
I'm like,
I'll
I
take
give
the
him
Calvinist.
props. Like that's a great. It's a catchy song, and it's still stuck in my damn head. I just want to get it out. But yeah, it's a catchy song, and I listen to other kinds of music. In Christ Alone's another good one.
Oh yeah, I love that song.
You like the Ball Brothers? I love the Ball Brothers.
I don't think I've come across them before. I listen to rock now because that's a good stress reliever.
Another Christian song is Through the Motions that I like too.
Yeah, Matthew Smith, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I like the rock version of it by Rock of Ages, I think it's called.
I want to check these groups out.
Yeah. Another Christian rock band that I actually didn't know were Christian initially is 1,000 Foot Crutch.
Yeah, my brother actually met them, I think. He's met a few. There's this thing called Winter Jam that goes around the country, and Skillet has gone a few years. Just a bunch of great bands and stuff.
I mean, you wouldn't even be able to tell for a lot of their songs that they're a Christian band.
Well, yeah, they use I guess metaphors would be the correct way. I'm trying to think of what would be the right
like VeggieTales?
No, just some of their songs have aspects. I guess you could say allusions, sort of references to ideas in the Bible and so on.
Well, I mean, if you ever listen to atheists sometimes, it seems like their matters of theology come straight from VeggieTales. They've never progressed past that stage.
Hey man, I used to watch VeggieTales.
Oh no, that's
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I like that show myself. I'm just saying it doesn't seem like they progressed past that in their theology.
That's fair enough. As long as no one dislikes VeggieTales, then we are all good here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still the best show in the food category.
There we go.
I wouldn't say
Yeah.
it's the best show on earth because it's not. But
Davy and Goliath is another Christian one. I like these songs. I mean, I like these shows, the Christian shows, that they don't make it a point to preach to you the lessons and hammer it home. It's like people don't want to hear about the Bible; they want to see the Bible.
yeah, I agree.
Convey the
That makes
story. Don't tell us it.
So,
Yeah.
John, I want to do a little devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I see you're challenging a Calvinist in the chat. So
I think there are two now. They're growing.
Yeah, because I invite Calvinists because I enjoy my conversations with them at school all the time. But I think there could be some sort of justification, you could say. Because if you're talking about the 5 points themselves, there's nothing. The problem of evil isn't necessarily tied in. Because some believe that Adam and Eve had a libertarian sense of free will. So when they reject God, then the fall happens, and then the whole Augustine view. Now you can challenge them on whether babies go to hell and stuff. Some would say no, and they would be part of the elect. But I would just ask them, well, what would be the scripture justification in your view for that? They would probably argue that God created everything good. And then when Adam and Eve chose to sin, that was a free choice. Augustine would probably argue that in free choice of the will. And then everything sort of becomes compatibilistic at this point. So it's not like God preordained evil. Now you can ask, well, foreknowledge and so on, but that's a whole other discussion. But I think they would try and argue that, and this would be like a soft Calvinist, not the generic type.
Yeah.
They would probably argue something like that, which also I wouldn't agree with.
Someone has a question about time. Jay, do you want to answer that?
I do have one. I need to make a better one. Asking the absurdity of life without God. It's one of my first ones. When I first started Windows Movie Maker, but I do have an article on it. I'll probably have to go through it again.
But do you believe God is within time?
Yeah. If you see my one video, I described this a little earlier. God is timeless before creation. Then when He creates, time exists and He indwells in it based on omnipresence. But He controls what that time will be, and He can. Because there are two main views of God's relationship to time. And a great book is William Lane Craig, Time and Eternity, exploring God's relationship to time. But one would say that time is eternal, but God exists around all time, so He would be eternal along with that. You just can't really use any cosmological arguments. The why, is there something rather than nothing but argument. Then one would be that God is timeless. And then Craig sort of combines the two a little bit, and that God would be timeless first, and then when He creates, since that's an act of time, simultaneous, of course, then He becomes temporal in that sense.
Yeah, but I have a different view.
Not temporal in a sense where He's bound by time.
Yeah, but I believe time is part of the nature of God, though. Like, it's immaterial. You can't find time under a microscope. It's, you know what I mean?
Well, and this is why I like Augustine in Confessions, Book 11, because they obviously didn't have modern science back then, but his philosophy of time is amazing for his time. Yeah, for his time, philosophy of time.
Time.
But
Yeah,
the objectors, I think, were the Manichaeans, or just people challenging what was God doing before creation. It's supposed to be a gotcha question. It's not. But he basically just asks them, what is time? And they can't answer it. And he surveys these different arguments. For this time, I would say we have a better understanding of time. We still don't completely know what it is for absolute certainty, but that's for a lot of things. So time would be change. And I also left a link in the description of divine personhood and divine timelessness, you could say. And Craig goes through a lot of arguments, so if you want to see whether a personal God is compatible with a timeless view before creation, then you can check that out in one of my most recent videos. But that's how I would argue. There's another question. And then if you guys have any other comments, you can
Well, I mean, you have to remember, man. 1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah, answer all questions or something like that.
But sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you.
That's just a suggestion anyway, so the gentleness and respect part is just a suggestion, you know. No, I'm kidding.
It's prescriptive.
No, it's just descriptive.
It's descriptive.
Jake Gaiman, hopefully that's your last name. So if God is within time, does he still foreknow? As a monist, I would say yes, because God would have middle knowledge of any possible world prior to creation. Then he chooses, and this is sort of the sovereignty part. He chooses which world he creates and so on with that knowledge. Any other questions? I want to make sure
is math descriptive or prescriptive or both?
I would ask John Lex. I would say it's descriptive of something that's prescriptive, because obviously Augustine also goes into philosophy of math, because he argues math is sort of immutable. It's weird because he sort of argued for a Platonic sense of numbers, because 1 times 17 will always be 17. You can't change that no matter how many times you try.
Yeah, epistemology there.
That would be more metaphysics, I think. But I haven't really gone into an argument for mathematics for the existence of God. I would be very interested in that, but first you have to be good at mathematics. I'm not really the best at mathematics, so.
Well, actually, Degrassi made an argument for God with math. He says there's several infinities that are larger than others. So you have several infinities.
Well, I don't believe an actual infinite can exist, mathematically speaking. I think mathematics proves that.
Yeah, it becomes philosophy, so either way, I still think it points to God anyway.
Sure, and this is why I like Christianity, and I'll give a view of. I think at the end of the day, and this is why I sort of like open theism. Of course, I don't agree with the omniscience issue, but some of the arguments that the atheists would put forth with divine omniscience and free will and so on, at worst, you go to something like open theism. You don't really abandon Christianity at all, so it's an option, which is nice about Christianity. While other views, you're either, well, in Islam specifically, you're either killing each other over Shiite or Sunni theology, which doesn't really seem to imply much options there. But I would say at worst, with some questions, you would go to something like open theism. I don't know if you would agree with that, John, but
yeah, I find that open theism does definitely have some advantages when it comes to people asking questions such as that. But I won't get into the whole the whole open theism thing. I'll just keep it in the chat. I won't take it to the voice. I have my limits, my boundaries.
Yeah, if you want to see our discussion on modern day debate, then it's on there on open theism.
That was really good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm reading some Molinism stuff now, so I'm educating myself. I also watched one of your last podcast. It was good. That guy was he was pretty good, so it was good to listen to.
Did you check out the Molinist Facebook page, or did I forget to send you a link?
No, I have not checked it out. I don't know if they'd let me in because I'm not a Molinist.
Neither am I.
If you send me questions and objections, then I'll post.
Oh,
them
sure,
and then,
sure,
and then
absolutely.
See,
another thing that would be helpful is if you send me some of the best answers they have. I'll definitely read them.
Yeah,
cool.
Send me an email with the scriptures and stuff you want to send me.
Oh, absolutely, I will.
Because I think your strongest point in that discussion was why would God regret and so on, and that was an interesting question. I admitted that I would have to go more exegetically into it, but that I like those questions. Okay, do I hold to libertarianism or soft libertarianism? I don't get the distinction. I believe that you're able to make a choice within your own ability, and you're not determined by anything else outside of that. And just because, and some will say if you literally have a reason, and this is how desperate I think arguments against free will become. If you literally have a reason for an option, somehow that's deterministic. But you're the rational creature that determines, is this a good reason to do this in the first place? So it doesn't. A theory or B theory of time and why. Okay, so me and Brass will disagree on this, but I would argue that there is a universal thing of time, since there is universal absolute time. I think Craig would put it in the universe. We can tell that it's 14.5 or so billion years old.
From human aspect, yes. From God, there is no age line. That doesn't exist.
Well, wait. Isn't time part of God's nature?
Yeah, but ascribing the A thing, he would be B for sure, because B means that it can go either way. I mean, it could go. There is no future, present, or So
the problem, I used to take that position, but I do think it ends up with a contradiction, because you're saying at one point, yeah, A theory is an actual thing from our human consciousness, but B theory literally says that time, past, present, and future is sort of illusion, and the flow of time is illusion to human consciousness. And
everything is present tense. I don't see how. To me, that makes sense perfectly.
Yeah, but you would have to say A theory isn't true, and it's an illusion at that point, if you want to say all moments are present at once.
I went into this in a little video I did.
I like that.
Yeah. Defending the Kalam on the B theory.
Yeah, I would also argue from A theory from intuition. Of course, Brass would disagree, and he would give the flat Earth example, but I would say there's different. I would say it's a sort of category here, but that's fine. Either way, what's nice, again, this Christianity is nice, and it's not unfalsifiable. You just have
different theories.
Yeah, because you have either you would just have to refute the arguments. If even on B theory, you can ask, well, why is there something rather than nothing? Or you can still use the fine-tuning argument, more ontological argument. I wouldn't suggest that one for starting out in evangelism at all. But argument from desire, I think, is another one. I want to develop a free will argument, and John may like that one.
Yeah, I probably would.
Okay, so there's one asking, so if you are so I'm a monist. John is a Calvinist, so is Praise. No, I'm kidding. John is an open theist.
Very funny.
Praise is a monist, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I am. I'm firm on that one.
Okay, for soteriology, I'm traditionalist. I don't necessarily tie monism to that. I think Praise would agree with me, because we both like latent flowers.
Oh yeah.
And then John, you can discuss your views on soteriology.
Yeah, I think that other than the fact that I would hold to like conditional security, I think everything else is like pretty much in line with what Leighton Flowers says. I think he's a really good teacher. I definitely like a lot of his stuff. But yeah, I'm curious if our views on conditional security are pretty similar, JMD, because I know, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to a certain extent we would both hold to it, right?
Now, define conditional security, because if you had to work, you have to maintain your salvation by works, by condition in that sense, then we would definitely disagree, but I don't think you would say that.
No, I wouldn't say like, oh, you have to do a certain amount of good things or whatever, but I believe like a person can apostatize from the faith if they choose to like walk away from God. It's possible.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, as a Molinist, you could tie Molinism into this and say God controls the circumstances, you could say, around you, so an opportunity to apostate won't come up, and that would be sort of perseverance of the saints, or God's sovereignty in that way, maintaining your free will, because you're still making choices and options, but God sort of, you can say, chooses the options.
I still think it's pretty hard to apostatize, though, because all you have to do is repent, and repentance is just a change of mind. So how can a Christian not just change their mind?
I honestly believe true faith. And someone messaged me real quick when they made one in. Okay, never mind. So when it comes to can one lose their salvation, I ultimately say it's between them and God. But for Christians in general, this is where apologetics comes in. You should give them a reason not to, if it's even possible that your position can be wrong on perseverance of the saints. You should have a open mind, or have a convinced mind, be convinced of your own mind, Romans 14, about this stuff, security and so on. And there won't be a time where you can apostate, because God, through the process of regeneration, your mind, will, and heart will always be towards Him. But then you can just ask them, well, if you sin during sanctification, is that your fault or God's fault if He's maintaining your own mind and so on, which is sort of a contradiction I find in that. But they can believe in perseverance of the saints if they want to. I won't necessarily argue. I would argue against it. But,
you guys hold to? Oh, sorry. I'll let you go first.
Oh yeah, and I was just going to say my approach in apologetics. I believe that you are the one who makes the action of faith, but first you have to have knowledge of God and especially the gospel. If you're unconvinced of the gospel, then obviously you're not going to believe because you don't even believe you believe it's fiction in the first place, which is a problem. Of course, the precepts don't think that, and they believe that you know the God of the Bible, but
everyone has general revelation of God.
Yeah,
you have, though.
Yeah, oh no, definitely. Romans 1 seems to make that clear, but there is a break between a general group of Gentiles and then those who take this knowledge of God and then do this list of sins in verses like 21 through 31, I believe. So I actually, for my next debate, because I enjoyed that conversation, I want to debate Satan Brudenke on the cumulative case versus presuppositional, his at least presuppositional apologetic method. And I would enjoy that debate. And
are you going to do it on Modern Day Debate?
Oh, yeah.
Sweet.
Well, he did a non sequitur show, so why wouldn't he go on your show? So I don't know. He should do it.
Well, I honestly wouldn't feel comfortable doing, because to them on that, it's just, well, who's Sky Daddy is better sort of ordeal. Steve won't say Sky Daddy because he's actually respectful of theistic beliefs and is good with the philosophy, but Aaron Raw would say something like that. Or anthropomorphized man or something like that. I actually pronounced that somewhat fine. There are a few more questions that I have to get to, but I can talk about this stuff all night if we want to.
Nice.
Answered that. Okay, so what would be your view of the theory of the atonement? Okay, so I'll basically explain mine, and then John, I know you have a view on this. And I know you want to say something before, so I'll let you get to that. Basically, I say that Christ's death was sufficient for all, but necessary for the elect, because I do believe in election, because Paul makes that clear. Maybe John would disagree, but I think he would agree that John would probably say that the election just means Christians in general or something like that. I think it's talking about individuals, but not in the Calvinist sense. So go ahead, John.
I would say that for the atonement, I'm kind of like going in between. It seems like the early church believed in Christus Victor, but I think even though moral government was kind of more recent, I think
real quick, could you explain the two positions you've described? Because I'm not familiar.
Yeah, both of them would say that I would say like I'm pretty hostile toward penal substitution, but I'm not going to be like unreasonable about it. I don't think it's like, oh, they're a heretic, they're not a Christian, any of that. I would say Christus Victor is like, okay, both of them that I'm deciding between, they both believe the atonement was necessary to forgive sin. The Christus Victor one would go more toward the fact of like Jesus' death defeated Satan and defeated the dominion that sin had over people and the dominion Satan had over sinners, so now they can be freed from sin. And then moral government's more of like killing Jesus was basically God's ultimate demonstration of his wrath toward evil, and now he's like able to forgive people, and that sacrifice makes it to where like his justice becomes satisfied and he can forgive a sinner. Both of them would say that and I'm reading more on the moral government because that's a pretty deep one that I'm not fully cognizant of, like as far as its depths, but both of them would say without the atonement we couldn't be forgiven. Now I kind of hold to a view that there was regeneration in the Old Testament, but I'm not super like hardcore on that either. That's just what it seems like when God says, I forget which prophetic book, but he's like, you guys need to get a new heart and a new spirit. And it seems like, I think Saul lost his salvation, but I think that he was like renewed to some extent, like he got a new heart as well. So I see some of that kind of language in the Old Testament too.
Cool. Me and Praise would probably somewhat agree. What would be, you'll probably be more familiar with Leighton's position on that, Praise. Something with provision.
It's provisional. He was thinking it's provisional, just like the brass snakes in the wilderness with when the Israelites were out there. And God said, look on the snake on the pole. Whoever looks on the snake will be saved. So whoever looks upon the Son will be saved. Even Jesus said that in John 3. So to me, it's provisional.
Interesting. Yeah, right now going through this, I went through Romans 9 a little bit on his commentary on it, but Leighton Flowers, the Potter's Promise. This is a biblical defense of traditional soteriology, so that's another interesting
That's a good book.
Oh, okay. Then I'll probably enjoy it. Right now, I'm trying to, because speaking about that debate, I'm going to message Satan because apparently, I'll have to tweet publicly. I'll do this later, but because I would enjoy that debate. That would definitely be something I would
man, that would
enjoy.
be awesome.
Yeah. So I got to the atonement question. Let me see if there's any more. I think there are a few more. Okay, so Sean Kroll makes Sean Kroll made an argument against fine tuning. Is it sound? If you're talking about the William Lane Craig one,
No, he's strawmanned it. I can easily debunk his argument anyway.
I can show a contradiction in their own refutations, which you have to hold one or the other, and if you do, then they have consequences for the positions you're holding, which shows cognitive dissonance or unawareness of the beliefs you hold. But basically, they want to say he basically argues that the multiverse does account for predictions on the Big Bang model, the gray states of galaxies. But then his objection to the Kalam is, well, there's no time before creation, so how could there be an active creation? But then you want to propose a multiverse with different times and so on. So obviously t = 0 is not the first instance of time, so that's a contradiction in it of itself. So choose one or the other. If you choose the time.
Well, he's strawmanned our argument, though. We're not saying the universe is fine-tuned for life. We're saying the universe is fine-tuned for itself, its own existence, and also the Earth.
Craig would say for intelligent life to exist anywhere, he would say that. But getting back to my dilemma here, if you say, okay, I take back the objection to the Kalam, okay, you can try and refute the fine-tuning argument. I would say there's other problems with it, but then you still have the Kalam to deal with, which if you don't deal with it, then you have a sound, and I think he got into B theory, but just in general, if you don't refute it and still sound valid, then you have an argument for God on the spot. But then, okay, no, I'm going to stick with the time objection. Then you don't have an argument against the fine-tuning argument, so you have to either come up with different refutations or choose one or the other. But if you choose one of them, then there's still an argument for the existence of God. Of course, that's dealing with those two objections in general. Of course, there's other arguments against the Kalam and fine-tuning, which I would say are not successful.
Yeah, but no Christian says the universe is fine-tuned for life, because the whole point of the Earth, God made
intelligent. Okay.
Yeah, but God made the Earth for a purpose for humans because they were the center of His creation. So he's strawman on arguing with that. So we're not saying the universe is fine-tuned for life. We're saying the Earth is fine-tuned for life, but the universe for itself to exist has to be fine-tuned, because it's like one. If it was off like 1/4,000,000th or something, I think Stephen Hawking said it would have destroyed itself. So that proves that the universe for itself is fine-tuned, and then also the Earth. But also, do you know the guy named Robin Collins? He said for the multiverse to work. For the multiverse to work, it has to be exponentially fine-tuned, even more than the universe.
Yeah, and that's where it bites the bullet. I'll steal John's phrase because I may start using that, unfortunately. But I can show.
What's unfortunate about it? You could have it, man.
Well, in our conversations, you really say that a lot with a point you want to get across. Do you bite the bullet on this? Just like, not necessarily, but I like the slogan I may have to steal. But another contradiction against any designer argument would be the designer would have to be too complex. If complexity requires design, then the designer would have to be too complex to create complexity and so on. First of all, category error God is not made of anything or parts, so there's no complexity involved. Yeah, my one video debunks that, but I'll grant them their premise. They can't use the multiverse anymore, because then you're proposing an actual infinite amount of universes that would have different constants, and one could even be even more fine-tuned. So then to account for these, you're obviously proposing something that is way more complex that will account for the complexity in our universe and so on. So that's another contradiction in their refutation. Any comments on that? Because I'm going to use that in a future article. There's another one. Okay, yeah, interesting question. Do atheists commit the gambler's fallacy by saying thousands of past religions were disproven? And yeah, they would, because they're saying, first of all, they're saying all religions have the same theology, but if so, then you want to also argue that they're contradictory, so God can't make himself clear. So that's another
Each
contradiction.
proposition's different too.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be. It would be like me saying, if I get heads, this is the typical gambler's fallacy analogy. I also have an article on this. If you flip heads 7 times, the first 6 times are tails. Most likely it will be tails. That's the gambler's fallacy because it's always mathematically going to be 50-50. So just like with this, let me see if I can connect this back. Let's see. Oh yeah, 3,000 religions have been before yours. What are the chances of yours being true? It depends on the claim. Now, if the claim is the same thing as other religions and they've been debunked, then sure. But just because other propositions have been debunked doesn't affect the truth value and the probability of the truth value. So it's another gambler's fallacy.
Well, I call it's a variation of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy.
Yeah.
Which is basically is the notion that basically like what you said, it's just like just because there is many alternatives does not mean that it lessens the probability of any one interpretation. Like
Exactly.
the fact that there's multiple interpretations of quantum mechanics does not invalidate quantum mechanics.
Yeah, certain views. And you can just end up arguing. I actually argued this in my one article with dealing with the non sequitur shows 15 unanswerable questions for Christians. Now I titled my article "Answering the Unanswerable Questions for Christians," and basically, and Brass will remember this because he did like a 15 video series. 4 of the questions were literally, well, there are 3,000 gods you can believe in, so what makes your God different? And I basically explained, well, first of all, you're rejecting all the propositions, so you have the bigger burden of proof. You have to show them all to be false for your claim to hold up, because you have to show that they're all contradictory in nature, which is big to show. I just argue the cumulative case that everything points more towards Christianity, so it's a probabilistic argument, I would say.
But how many eternal deities are there? I mean, for all the gods,
Yeah.
Only 3. Okay, you have the Muslim one, you have the Abrahamic one, and Jews, and then the Christian. That's it. There's one more. I think there's one other one.
Well, they won't
argue,
they won't argue that we have the bigger burden of proof, but if they want to use this argument, then they do, because they have to disprove them all. They have to show them all to be similar. They have to show them all to be equally irrational. With irrationality isn't necessarily
Well, I mean, Zeus could not be one of the possible gods because Zeus is an eternal and he isn't a contingent.
Well, yeah, and and with this argument, I basically said they all have a common thread. There's the supernatural, so we're all disagreeing with you, and you're rejecting all those. So prove naturalism to be true, and your argument holds up as well, because you're assuming your own position.
Yeah, and prove nature is fundamental. There's nothing in science that demonstrates the nature is fundamental. There's nothing.
Yeah, and they're trying to say, well, you're confusing philosophical naturalism with methodological naturalism. I butchered that. Basically, that's in science alone, you act that nature is all there is with these tests. Yeah, but that's still a philosophical proposition. You're assuming nature is all there is when you're doing science tests and no account of the miraculous. I wouldn't say I would say science can help point towards, historically speaking, towards inductive arguments towards a miracle happening in the past, aka the resurrection or something like that.
Yeah, but inductive arguments are subjective, though. They're never objective.
No, I completely disagree. It would be on a probabilistic case. And it has to do with logic, by the way, bro. But can you even logic, bro? Nah, I'm kidding. Yeah, the 3,000 gods argument, any atheist who is seriously into philosophy, I don't see them using it.
We just narrowed it down before, though, just by eternality itself.
And one more thing you can add in with tautology, the law of non-contradiction. If you literally prove one to be true, if I were to show that Christianity is true, now this is sort of the point of the argument, which is fine. Well, if you're saying, how can Christianity be true if there's 3,000 other religions? If they're all contradictory and I show Christianity to most likely be the case, and by default they're all most likely, or if I somehow give a deductive argument showing they're all that Christianity is like absolute certainty, which would be a sort of a presuppositional argument if successful. I don't think they are, unfortunately, but that would be nice because there are some aspects of presuppositionalism I respect, but I just don't evidently and logically I don't think it works out. Well, if you show Christianity's propositional truth value to be true, then by the law of non-contradiction, the other ones are false and disproven. So that's easy to debunk as well. Now, of course, they're going to say, well, at this point, prove it, and that's fine. Let's see if there are any more questions. I said God has one. Oh, sure. I said God has one will with three separate facets we refer to as three wills. Yeah, I would like to see that because I get confused with that, which is fine. But so no more questions at the moment. Anything you guys thought about that you may want to bring up with dealing with the 3,000 gods argument or anything in general?
Yeah, I mean, that was the common thing that was in the video that I found it was used a lot. What was asked twice was about the atonement.
Yeah,
which
because
we
I
got.
saw one.
Well, there was two of them. One by Vice Rhino and another by Godless Cranium.
Oh, I thought you were talking about in the chat. Yeah. Basically asking why is blood necessary? I basically argue, well, geez, blood was sacrificed in Christ's name, who didn't die, by the way. He rose from dead. Of course, perhaps would disagree, but that's fine for this discussion alone, I would say. But by default, no more blood has to be spread, so he can just forgive you if you repent and so on and have faith. And that's sort of the point they miss with this question against Christianity. And if they miss that point, then they're really just attacking a straw man. But go ahead, Dress. I'm sorry for interrupting.
I mean, personally, I go more for like, I know that there are going to be disagreements, but I do sort of go for the penal substitution notion.
Me too.
Which, I mean, I just think it sort of makes more sense when you take into the context the situation where Jesus was literally under, the Roman law. And I think that, when you take that into context with it, I think it is hinting at a law kind of, notion. I, however, I don't want to make it a strict law thing. I think that honor and shame actually come into this. I generally take the position that, sin is like an honor offense against God. And every, sin that you do is taking honor away from God who rightly deserves it. And he shames those who degrade his honor. And Jesus underwent, a shameful act, the cross. And that way he can act, as like a broker between us.
Yeah, good point.
Tying it to open theism, maybe, and Johnny can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but maybe you hold to something, maybe you reject penal substitution. From my understanding, it would cover sins for all the elect. I'm probably wrong on that, and educate me on that if I'm wrong. But I think it plays in with God's omniscience, because if God knows who will be saved and tries to...
Are you talking about Calvinism?
It'll tie in with that and Molinism, I guess. I'll just ask John, does your position of the atonement tie in with omniscience at all? Or your rejection of foreknowledge of the future?
Well, I would definitely say that like a penal substitution does need to have omniscience, and I don't think like God would need to know every single person that he is dying for. I just think that his atonement is effectual for everyone that, wants it, basically. I guess that seems like what Leighton Flowers would believe as well, but I don't believe like Jesus was literally infused with sin and became sin or like became a sinner.
No,
I think he was like a sin offering for the forgiveness of sin.
Well, no, it's penal substitution with debt. So each sin is debt, and so we accrue debt, so only Jesus' blood can atone for that debt. That's the way I look at it.
And if I like kind of Frank Turek's way that he went about like the Old Testament and what they did. Basically, he describes it as like a credit card. And what they were doing is when they were sacrificing animals and so forth, they were putting it on their blessings on a credit card and their hope on it, their faith on the credit card. You never actually pay anything off with the credit card. But what happens is that Jesus fully took that collective debt altogether and he paid it off.
Yes.
I'd like to take like more of an honor and shame approach because I think that fits more the tone.
Okay, so there's a perfect verse that I love using against those who say, well, if you're somehow able to have faith, then isn't that a work in and of itself? And Paul would say, even though he doesn't say this directly, but he says this a lot, by no means, and I'll screen share this, basically Romans 4:5, John will probably be familiar with this verse.
Oh, yeah.
But to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is credited as righteousness. I think I have to go to the next one. Of course, he goes to Romans 5, which is a pain. And this actually ties into the atonement, my view, I guess. So maybe I would hold to like a debt view. Let's see here. Just as David also calls a blessing. Okay, now the one who works, his wage is not credited as righteousness, but as what is due. Dude isn't a word, I don't think, but to the one who does not work, but believes in him. So basically, Paul is saying faith is not a work because it's not trying to maintain your own salvation like a wage pays off a debt. So
the wages of sin is death, so it tells you right there it is death.
What, debt or death?
Debt. The wages have to do with debt. The debt of sin is death, yeah.
Well, when you said the wages of sin is death, I thought you were trying to quote from Romans as well.
Yeah, I was.
Sorry, there were two more questions. Go ahead and say what you're going to say, Brass. I missed one that I missed.
Yeah. I have looked into the Christus Victus interpretation. I think N.T. Wright holds something to that degree. Yeah. I would find, I think you can make the argument for it. There is something there. I would just say I think that I would find that most probably, since I'm trying to take into the context of, what's happened, what is the significance of the laws and where Jesus is coming from. I'm, trying to apply the situation because I would like to think that every kind of step that is going through with the cross is in some relation to the culture and stuff, as giving hints from God.
Okay. So
one thing that I do. Oh, sorry. You go for it.
No, because there's a question I have to answer, but go ahead.
I was gonna say that I think that if Satan, I know this is kind of a curveball, but I think if Satan knew Jesus was the Son of God and the Messiah and all that, I don't think he would have killed him, because then he would have just basically been conceding okay, I'm gonna allow all of humanity to be atoned for. It seems really contrary to his self-interest. So right. I think he was kind of shrouded, he didn't really know who Jesus was. He just saw someone fully filled with the Holy Spirit, I gotta get that guy to basically be the Antichrist. That's kind of how I saw it.
Well, it's never said that Satan is omniscient. Even though he would like to be in there, the thing is that, for example, Satan wanted Jesus to hurl himself off a high place.
Yeah.
And basically, the point of that was to show that he didn't really have faith in God, because he wanted to test. He basically wanted God to be like a genie for him. And Jesus was pointing out that that's not how it works.
You're telling me that he doesn't grant my every wish?
Yeah.
You're telling me the book of Job is true?
I always find when I get into discussions with atheists, it's like dealing with young earth creationists, because I feel like you sort of, before you even get started, you have to explain to them what actually is the subject and what actually it is, and you have to sort of go through a lesson with them.
Uh-huh.
Wait,
And then
atheists
what-
or young Earth creationists?
Both.
Oh, well, I was going to say atheists are
That's
a
funny.
lot more, because at least young Earth creationists are in the same framework as me.
Well, I mean,
in my
no,
worldview.
like this. It's like, for example, I think like in theology-wise, for example, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like I compare, theology and young Earth creationism, like evolution, because I feel like when I'm talking to a young Earth creationist about evolution, I can't go in there presuming that they actually know what evolution is about, because most of the time they don't. Ken Hovind doesn't.
Well, most atheists, or
Get
some,
open.
I think even Aaron Rowe and a few other evolutionists did admit that, generally speaking, most people don't understand the process of evolution itself, even some of those who teach it in the public schools.
Well, everyone is an evolutionist to some degree.
Well, yeah, you have to believe in change over time to some degree.
Right.
If you don't, then...
I mean,
It's just we
it's
don't
like-
believe a pond scum turned into a monkey and then a monkey. We just don't believe that.
Yeah, no offense,
I mean,
but
here's
I
what's
find
funny.
that to
And
be
here's
a
what's funny about this. If you actually look at the
drag.
history of this, it's like Darwin wasn't the first one to notice changes over time. Like, we have stuff going back to Aristotle that talked about, like, where they talked about they thought men came from fish.
Well,
Well,
Egyptians did too.
You also have I forget their names, atomizers, I think, where they literally believe that everything is composite of smaller things, and they actually, I think, called them atoms, which may be why we get the name atoms. We obviously, well, we didn't, but whoever discovered the atom, I forget, but
The Greeks did, yeah.
well, they had that theory. They didn't have microscopes, I don't believe.
No.
And when we discovered atoms, it's like, oh, these dudes were really smart. And this proves the claim that, the biblical writers were in times of scientific illiteracy, because you have people theorizing before atoms, before
I mean,
we
well,
had the discovery of it.
I always like to mention, like, the Greeks didn't really do science. They did philosophy that
Yeah.
ties into science.
Well, people
didn't,
want to say
like-
science and philosophy are separated, but they're not.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can't really separate the methodology of philosophy from it, but there's a big difference, because the Greek philosophers didn't believe in actually doing experiments or doing manual labor, because they were
Obviously,
rich.
they'll be.
They were rich, and they thought that kind of thing was reserved for slaves.
Nowadays, if you don't do it, you're a heretic to society or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to believe in scientism, which would be the worldview. Everything has to be scientifically explained.
I still
To
don't
me
understand how
personally-
induction is objective, though.
It depends on your axioms and so on, I would argue. If you're Descartes, then which I like Descartes. The only thing there's only a few things we can know with absolute certainty, but anything inductive, I don't think you can have absolute certainty with.
Yeah.
Which is a scary thought, because I'm talking to all you right now, but I could just be talking to, like, I could be in God's mind, an idealist perspective, where I could just be in a video
Same,
game or something like that. I think I have good reason to believe that I'm not, but I could be.
Well, I mean, here's what I always say about that sort of stuff. I say, why does it ultimately matter? I mean,
You're
like,
being a pragmatist, then.
yeah, I mean, because I'm like this, is like, even if, for example, that this world is an illusion, I found that out today, that this world's an illusion in some way, what is really going to change anything? I say, oh, that's an interesting thing. I'm still
Well-
going to live my life as if this is concrete.
Well, Steve McRae, he brought up a great point, and I would say that if he thinks about it further, he will draw theistic conclusions about nihilism and so on. But he said, well, geez, if we were in a video game simulation, morals sort of go out because you're not responsible to anyone. Sure, there may be consequences in it, but if you can get away with it, then he said, I believe, and if he watches this later, he can correct me on his position, but I believe he said that you all know more. You're not morally responsible to video game characters. And if he found out he was in a video game simulation, he would hold that view. I sort of take that further, if you view a world of a sort of naturalistic framework, you could use that analogy he gives of the video game, where if there is no God ultimately behind, not the reason for why we have morality and so on, but the foundation for it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is like, a video game character would have no free will.
Oh yeah, and this is a question I have for idealists, but they would have to work out something with that.
Well, no, it's inside. Okay, we can say the outer world. What do you call it? The exterior would be the video game, but the interior, like an avatar, it'd be. See, we're avatars with spirituality.
Yeah, IP believes
wait. We're tall, blue-skinned, monkey-like things.
Yeah.
Oh, so you do believe in evolution?
That really explains a lot.
Yeah, with the atheist.
Yeah, it's all starting to make sense now.
Exactly. I would say theology. If we were all in like the Matrix, I would say theology is useless because at least biblically speaking, because I don't think you could argue for anything like that. I wanted to say something. Oh, IP inspiring philosophy believes that the body is a physical manifestation of the soul, so that would go along with Praise's view, I think.
Does he also like not believe in hell, like that it's not literal?
He's not real.
Yeah, he's not a nihilist like Praise, but
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel better, I don't believe in hell is literal.
Well, yeah, because you're a deist,
but that's fine as a deist. Like, I'm not gonna bust your chops for that one as a deist.
I would say study Christianity a little bit further, but
the lake of fire. That's what. Okay, yeah. IP was saying
I don't believe in
hell's not. Yeah, people are burning and screaming and stuff.
No. Well, there may be that, but it's nothing like the show Lucifer. Which
I've never even seen that show.
Yeah, but I was just like, oh, they just released a
for the 1950 Baptists, what they do. You're gonna burn in hell like a piece of bacon.
Or Steven Anderson, but
Steven Anderson, no.
He's such a weirdo.
I know.
Oh, I know. But they released Lucifer. I think this TV series shows it's a garbage show. They try and argue biblical theology. If you've seen it, perhaps it's horrible. It's sort of entertaining to think about, is Satan around in human form as an Australian actor in a TV show? But
he's the Antichrist.
Yeah, I basically told my brother they literally have a satanic show on Netflix now. That and they have Ellen DeGeneres.
Not that fake satanic stuff like what they have now. I mean, I'm talking about real deal.
Yeah, like literally. By definition, you can make a deductive argument. It's satanic by definition because it's a show.
Yeah, I mean, like me personally, it's like I would say that I say that it's like I have more respect for the theistic Satanists than anything else because at least they're serious and they're not just atheists trying to troll.
Real quick, I feel bad for you, John, that you're 25 minutes away from Steven Anderson.
Dude, it makes me so sad. Wait. One way to talk to him real quick. If you're 10 minutes from James White, we might not be that far away from each other because
I like James White. I do like James White on his Trinitarian stuff. And
I can see
he's
that.
He's a good theologian, but as far as hermeneutics, he sucks terribly.
No, I think he's good with hermeneutics because he knows how to work with the
because of Calvinism.
I
think he murders John 6, to be honest, and he stays on it for so long.
I think they do murder John 6 as well.
I want to see you do a video on John 6, actually. I think it'd be good.
Going to.
Sweet.
I can help you with that, JD. I have some good stuff on that.
Yeah, I'll probably use Leighton's book because he has some pretty good arguments. Okay, there are two questions I've had to get to here. Can you explain more on God being temporal since creation? Since creation. Yeah, that'll be after. I just believe that if we hold God as being present at all times, then it would seem to imply some sort of temporality, because if you say he's outside the universe in a timeless state, then how could he be present?
That's a logical contradiction. He can't be outside of the universe.
Well, people say he's outside and inside, but you're saying there's literally a place outside of space, which is weird to think about. I think quantum mechanics supplies good knowledge against that argument, against the Kalam or anything.
Yeah, it's more like a holograph. That's why I like the holograph projection of God.
And that's where idealism can come in. I would agree with the same premise that mind comes before matter, but at the same time, I just disagree with the compositional error or compositional fallacy I think you guys commit, but that's fine because we ultimately point at the same thing and come to the same conclusion. And I also think an act of creating time doesn't necessarily require time, but if it does, and it answers the objection, well, how can you say before when time t equals 0 and so on, then the act can be simultaneous, and then boom. Now, when God does that, then I believe he is in a sort of temporal state. So that would be my argument. And then another question, thoughts on the Shroud of Turin. I think it is. I would.
Say debunk that.
Yeah, it would be hard to argue that it's specifically for Christ. At best, you could get to, well, okay, this is from the 1st century. Maybe it would show.
Yeah, and they showed that on there's the most recent, like last year, they had all these people looking at it, researchers, scientists, and they debunked it. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Gary Habermas wrote a book on it. I wouldn't base my arguments for the resurrection on it. At best, it would show, okay, they got something right about ceremonial practices back then that, they use these shrouds and turrets.
Yohanan was a better one than that. The Yohanan discovery with the nail through his heel, I think it was, they found from Jesus' time. I think that's way better than the shroud.
Yeah, well, I think there are much better examples you can use. Now, if we somehow had the DNA of Christ and then, oh, look, here's the same DNA, which I sort of agree with Dawkins in some degree. I mean, DNA evidence would be interesting, but then you would be like, oh, Jesus, there God DNA, because you have the incarnation. Would there be that would be that's a joke, obviously, because.
Well, I mean, technically, what would be weird about it is that he wouldn't have any father DNA.
Yeah, in the virgin birth.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, you know what? I actually pointed it there. Actually got pointed out by someone is like by the illogic of RCA's argument of a natural virgin birth.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about female anatomy.
Yeah, when I heard him talk about it, I was like,
why just say here's a case, just describe it briefly, and don't be like 5 inches and. No, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Well, he was talking about parthenogenesis. The problem with parthenogenesis in Christ is that parthenogenesis logically only can get you the female.
I wouldn't say logically, I would say inductively from observation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, we don't really have much examples, or I don't think any examples of a female being able to use that cycle of parthenogenesis to get a male out of it. It's always the female, and logically that has to be the case because, like, where's the man come in?
We can say logically. Sorry, that's just my pet peeve with logic. What is logic?
Want me to get the Oxford? Want me to get the Oxford Advanced Learner's Dictionary definition?
Yes, you're petty.
Rational inference.
That's still the best moment ever in any conversation. I wish it was recorded because I would literally just upload that, split it and so on, and just do 10 hours of it of him calling me petty for asking him a simple question.
That's always the worst when people like get all upset when you just ask them one question and they can't defend it.
Yeah, Brass and Hunter Bailey are a eyewitness to this, or I don't know if eyewitness would be appropriate. A witness to this that I literally asked this atheist who was just like, it's illogical to believe in God and religion and so on. I asked him, what is logic? He couldn't answer my question. He called me petty and he never wanted to talk to me again. Just like, oh, that's a great response if you want to have.
Do you want to tag JMD yet? A tag video? I think you did, didn't you?
No, you did the tag video in that article, so it's on.
No, I mean the video.
Wait, what video?
I mean, did you do a video on the tag yet?
No, I uploaded your video. See, my problem with it, from your position, I don't think you're a presuppositionalist, so you can make sort of a deductive argument for why God being the foundation for it, or why we have these in the first place. But the presuppositional problem, the problem I have with the tag argument from a Matt Slick perspective, is if you're going to argue that God is necessary preconditions for intelligibility, that's the way they say it. You have to really presuppose the laws of logic to come to that conclusion, make that argument. So saying God's the
You're saying it's circular?
Yeah, I am. Especially when they say it's the Christian God and so on. Also, I agree with the conclusion that the Christian God exists, but we come to that.
Well, I think everyone has to be
if you frame it in, if you frame it in a deductive manner, that the claim of circularity goes out there.
Yeah, but I just want to say, I don't think you could argue that God would be the necessary preconditions for intelligibility, because you're making an argument for this based on the laws of logic, which you're presupposing before you're arguing that God is necessary to presuppose them. And I just find it to be viciously circular, and then they go into the
well, it's a priori though. Everyone has to be circular at that point if it's a priori or a priori.
Well, it's not circular if it's a priori. It's intuition and so on. But I would say they're self-evident and they're indubitable, meaning there's no argument that can show them to be false, like the law of non-contradiction. It will always be like that in every case. And you could make some sort of deductive argument. Maybe
you're saying they're axiomatic?
Yeah, but I would say you can actually show them to be the case because any epistemology depends upon them. And this is why
isn't that circular itself, though? If you're saying that it's axiomatic because you say it's axiomatic, how do you prove it's axiomatic?
Because any argument you try and disprove it or even say it's circular, you're presupposing them. Because you need these.
Yeah, but
these are
what I'm saying. Anyone has to. Anyone who tries to appeal to logic has to be circular. So I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a theist or atheist.
I would completely disagree. Because I think any argument we develop presupposes validity, soundness, and so on. The law of non-contradiction. If you try and disprove the law of non-contradiction, you're literally trying to show it to be false, which presupposes that. And the principle of indubitability, I butchered that, basically says that no argument can show them to be false. And it's not an argument from ignorance. It's literally saying you can't show these to be false.
But how can it not be presuppositional, though? Because we both need presuppositions. It's a priori. So, I mean...
Describe presupposition, because I don't think you would use it in the same sense that they would.
A precondition. That's the same thing as a presupposition.
I mean, I could agree. Yeah, I said earlier that they're the necessary preconditions for intelligibility, because you can't make sense of anything without them, which is fine. My original point would be then, and you would seem to agree with that, if you admit that, then you can't use the tag argument for God as the necessary preconditions for intelligibility. That's just my biggest, and I don't even have, my objection wouldn't even be how do you ground it in the Christian God. What they would say is, well, okay, I'll go through and disprove all the other ones, while you can just take the cumulative case where a classical apologist proof will say, hey, take the law of non-contradiction. If you show this one to be true, then the other are false by default, and you would debunk or refute, or however you want to put it. So I think they bring in more that they try and resolve. I think there's another question. Oh, did you watch TMM's video on what would convince them to believe in God? And is he stupid?
The answer to the second one is yes.
Yes. On this, yeah, well, he's an atheist, which basically says God is incomprehensible. But then they want to say, well, God is incomprehensible. That's a comprehensible statement. You're saying it's incoherent. Which I'll have to say you have to understand what God is to say something is incoherent.
But convincibility is arbitrary, though, anyway.
Yeah, well, this is why I like my knowledge video, because I say there's a standard you have to go by, which is universal. Reality itself, and I would say laws of logic, you have to follow them at all times. I would say it's inner being. And I would say that when it comes to whether you can choose your beliefs, you cannot, in any circumstance, I believe, to believe something to be true and false at the same time. You can say you do, but you don't believe that because unless you somehow can hide one belief away in your subconsciousness or even in your unconsciousness somehow, however that would work, and then be aware of the one at all times, and perhaps, but you wouldn't actually be aware and believing that because belief is an attitude towards a certain proposition.
It's a mental state.
It's a propositional mental state.
Yeah. Did you see my knowledge video, Brass? Oh yeah, because you posted. I think you posted the Oxford Dictionary definition of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, atheism. My favorite claim is convince me that God exists. You ask him, well, Okay, what would convince you? I don't know. That's your burden proof. Just like, so you're unconvinced of something that you don't know. What would convince you? Okay, you can't define God or logic, so the logic is just in the case of that one
Yeah,
person
you're
who's
asking to
anxious.
put be magic and change his mental state. I mean, that requires magic, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, we can do that. I mean, I have some good pills for that.
See,
But I mean,
when
I don't think we want to go that route.
Yeah.
LOL, yep, JMD. I don't know to which point you would be saying that. I would agree with that. That which is truly incomprehensible is actually unknown by us. Yeah, and then you can just ask them, well, is the universe completely comprehensible? If they say no, then okay, then what's the difference between God? Then they would say, if you message me on Discord HistoryNet, then I'll send you the link. But crap, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Then they would say, well, God's outside of time. What does that mean? Then you get into philosophy of time, which is a whole other thing. And I agree, it's very difficult. But if you're going to make this objection and then not even look into the philosophy and hold this objection, you're being intellectually dishonest or lazy, I would say.
Or both.
Yeah. Not a false dichotomy. It can be both.
Mm-hmm. I always just do that because that's a common thing that comes up where people just say it either has to be this or that. And I just say, no, it can be both.
Yeah.
I think, like someone will say, oh, you're either ignorant or you're dishonest. I could say you could be both a little bit. You can be ignorant to a certain degree while still saying falsehoods.
Well, yeah, you can be You can be dishonest about what you know. So even though you're ignorant of some things, you still have the capability to lie about something that you know is true.
Well, know what I always find funny? That atheists always do this, and it's stupid as hell. Like they'll say that, when they became atheists, they became very angry because they felt that their parents lied to them. Lying denotes intent. Like, so wait, were your parents atheist and they just told you to believe in Christianity and they told you later on that God isn't real? Lol. So, I mean, like, lying presupposes that you know the truth of the proposition beforehand.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, there's a difference between lying and being ignorant. There's a difference.
Yes, thank you. Because RCA, this is another point of contention that we disagree on. He says that if someone is unconvinced, or let me say ignorant of the Christian God's existence, but then they pray to another God, they're lying about the Christian God. But no, they're ignorant about that, which is sort of why you spread the gospel to them and so on.
Well, yeah,
that makes sense.
There's a difference because, lying denotes that you intend something. Ignorance is just that you don't know. So, I mean, lying takes a little bit more knowledge. Although I can say ignorance can be worse at times.
Well, there's an act of volition in a lie where, I know this to be true, but I'm going to, usually a lie I would say is in benefit of yourself or to avoid, trouble, which is why you may lie to your parents about, I don't really want to get hit with a wooden spoon or something like that. That's in reference to my childhood, but,
yeah.
Does anyone else have a fearful mother? You could use that as the analogy of God and hell, perhaps. But,
sure.
is this a question for me, Anchored?
No, not for you. Not for you. No worries.
Oh, wait. There's would Occam's razor cut out the Trinity as an all-powerful whole God would explain all the things the Trinity could do? Let me reread this, because...
Well, here's the thing. Occam's razor, for one,
it's scientific. Yeah, it's...
Well, it's not... Well, no, it's not even that. For one, Occam's razor simply says that you shouldn't go beyond necessity with your emphasis.
Yeah,
like, if you can have some... If you can have... Like, you can have presumptions. It's just... it's not... You just can't have unnecessary presumptions.
I would say concerning the Trinity... If it explains more in the Bible with the text, and then because of course the word Trinity is not in the Bible, it's that the theory, you could say, of accounting for all these verses and so on that seem to imply relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. in a co-eternal sense.
Personally, I believe what a lot of scientists are actually discovering is that I do find that a majority of kids, about me and JMD's age, well, young adults technically, but would be the better word for it. But I think the phenomenon that's going on really is a thing called moralistic therapeutic deism. It's a little term that's been going around where it's like when they question people on their actual beliefs, they seem to fall more in line with deism than anything else, but they tend to have some deists argue against it because they say it's more theism, which I find it stupid because deism is theism because the very definition of theism is a belief in God.
Well,
it's like I'll give you a deductive argument for this.
Well, real quick,
Theism,
to be fair, you could define theism to mean a personal, loving God, because some do define it that way, but if you define it that way, then that's just semantics. But generally speaking, I would agree with you, but good with your argument.
Well, I mean, it's like this. It's like theism is the belief in God. Deism has a belief in God. Therefore, deism is theism.
You just believe that God abandoned us long ago.
I mean, some deists take that more, bro. But I mean,
do some theists or theists do they believe?
Personal, right?
Yeah, but do they sometimes believe that God may die? And if so, I would say they're not a theist in a classical sense. If you view God as the greatest conceivable being.
Some deists, many deists go many different ways on it. It depends on their philosophy in which they go on. Typically, I follow more under the Aristotelian, Aristotle's way of deism, that's pretty much what he was when you actually look at his works. I find that, and the thing about Aristotle is he never attributed miracles or even emotions to God.
No, the Stoics did that when they synchronized Zeus with God, with all the tales of him coming to Earth and taking human form was all allegory and fairy stories you tell your children.
And I would also question, just like the Horus video, which is hysterical. I would just question their sources in general and their claims. You can accuse me of confirmation bias, but I think I have justification for it. I'm almost skeptical. It's like the flaying atheism. I'm almost skeptical of the mythicist claims, among many atheist claims. Now, when it comes to something I'm not knowledgeable about, then I should withhold judgment until I do research into it. That would be the intellectually, morally right thing to do, I would say. But generally speaking, if it's something I've heard over and over again and is similar to the claim that you hear over and over again, I'm skeptical of it.
Well, I mean, now on Twitter, I'm called the brass skeptic, and I actually have the fedora hat on.
Is nihilism compatible with Christianity?
Yeah,
No.
Johanna Ross made that, or Johannan said it was that.
Mind of Voltaire seems
It's conceptual nihilism. I don't think it's the nihilism you're talking about, though.
Well, so the Calvinists in the chat maybe hyper Calvinism. I'll say those who are not part of the elect should be nihilistic if they're able to and aren't predestined to hold some other view. Obviously, with the elect, there's hope, meaning and purpose, and so on. God determines that. But on the view of hyper Calvinism, I would say that those who are damned before the foundations of the earth, independent of any sort of compatibilistic view, just God predestines them, independent of any sort of knowledge at all, then yeah, I would say nihilism is justifiable. If you're able to be nihilistic, then I would say that sort of presupposes some sort of form of libertarian free will concerning propositions. But I would say that's perhaps one position. But not all Calvinism would hold to that. Obviously, soft Calvinism would be able to work out the kinks and stuff.
Typically, the reason why I don't personally go to to compatibilism is generally because whenever I have looked at the philosophies on it, they more or less explain the feeling of free will rather than what actually is free will.
Well, I heard a actually good definition from, well, a good definition of compatibilism that would maybe be my view, because ultimately I do think the universe is